Travel to the United States has fallen sharply this year.
We have seen some decline in demand to the U.S., and as a result, we've redeployed some of our capacity into domestic markets across the Atlantic and into Latin Caribbean destinations.
Just weeks ago, Florida's coastal resorts bustling with preparations expected waves of Canadian tourists to descend like clockwork. They had done so every summer for decades. But June 2025 delivered a stark twist. Flights from Canada to Florida dropped by over 25%, according to international booking platforms. And that wasn't an isolated glitch. There were no hurricanes, no travel bans, no health alerts. Just a quiet, collective decision not to come. And the silence is growing, because it's no longer about crossing a border. It's about choosing a direction. More and more Canadians are turning away, not in anger, but in disillusionment. And the United States is starting to feel it. Theme parks like Universal Studios and Disneyland had forecast Canadian tourists to make up at least 20 to 30% of their summer foot traffic. That number has fallen to 12 to 15%. Park operators are quietly laying off seasonal workers, shortening opening hours, and even canceling scheduled shows. Hotel managers in Orlando report record vacancy rates for July, a month that, until now, was synonymous with full bookings and overbooked waiting lists. In Las Vegas, where tour groups from Ontario and Quebec once filled entire casino halls, the lobbies now feel colder, louder, emptier. Flights from major Canadian cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Calgary to U.S. destinations are being slashed. Even with airfare prices down 30% compared to summer 2023, planes are flying half empty. Several airlines have started consolidating routes, canceling weekend service altogether. "We've never seen a summer like this," one airline executive told CBC. "Price isn't the issue, it's a sentiment." According to STR Canada and Destination Canada, 43% of Canadians who originally booked travel to the U.S. this summer canceled or rerouted their plans. 27% opted instead for trips to Europe, Mexico, or the Caribbean. 19% chose domestic holidays, citing safety, affordability, and less stress as reasons. Only 11% cited price as their main concern. The rest cited political climate, border friction, and lack of hospitality as top reasons. This isn't a boycott. It's not an organized campaign. It's a quiet withdrawal of affection. The Canadian American Exchange Institute sounded the alarm in its June 2025 report. If the current decline continues, by 2027, less than 35% of Canadians under 30 will have visited the United States. That matters because travel builds familiarity, trust, shared stories, friendships, language, investment, and once a generation drifts apart, it doesn't easily return. University admissions officers in New York and Chicago are already seeing a drop in Canadian applicants, down 18% this year. Cross-border startups that once relied on travel-friendly relationships report delays, legal headaches, and a growing chill between collaborators. Even seasonal business visas are taking longer to process. And when Canadians don't feel welcome, they simply stop showing up. Tourism isn't just about money. It's about connection. It's grandparents meeting halfway, students doing exchange programs, couples celebrating anniversaries abroad, families road tripping through national parks. But now, for many Canadians, the U.S. feels like a place of tension, unpredictability, and confrontation. And that's a wound harder to heal than any lost revenue. America can drop prices, run ads, launch welcome back campaigns. But unless it addresses the why behind the exodus, fear, friction, and fatigue, the silence will continue to grow. Because sometimes the loudest protest isn't shouted, it's packed into a suitcase and rerouted to somewhere else. If this trend persists, the summer of 2025 won't just mark a tourism downturn. It'll be remembered as the moment a friendship cooled, and a continent felt colder because of it.
So as you heard, the federal government continues to face mounting pressure to get a deal done with the United States.
I think we do need an urgent resolution, but not at all costs. So I do think it's good to put some urgency on this, both for the Canadian economy and the U.S. economy.
Canada is in the middle of a trade standoff it never asked for, but it may still be able to shape how this story ends. As Trump's 35% tariffs loom, many expected Canada to cave quickly under pressure. But that hasn't happened. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney has taken a disciplined approach, deliberate, methodical, and unusually quiet in contrast to Trump's headline-driven playbook. His goal is not to win a public shouting match, but to secure real exemptions where it matters most: energy, steel, aluminum, and autos. This isn't about getting to zero tariffs. Even Carney has acknowledged that a no-tariff agreement is no longer realistic. But there is room to shift the outcome, from total imposition to selective protection. The likely landing zone? A general tariff rate in the 8 to 10% range, with key sectors carved out. That wouldn't be a victory in full, but it would be a reversal of momentum, away from Trump's terms and toward Canada's priorities. And that shift matters. Because this time, the pressure isn't one-sided.
I watched the show this morning. They were talking about, well, when's he going to make the deal? The deals are already made. The letters are the deals. The deals are made. There are no deals to make.
Trump doesn't use tariffs as tools. He uses them as declarations. Letters sent to trade partners, including Canada, aren't warnings. They're, in his view, the final word. The letters are the deals, as his team describes it. But the strategy is unstable. Inconsistent deadlines, sudden shifts, and unilateral decisions have created confusion across industries. Even close allies don't know whether they're negotiating or reacting. And this isn't just about politics. The economic impact is beginning to show. According to the San Francisco Federal Reserve, U.S. GDP could shrink by 0.4% over the medium term due to these tariffs. Inflation has already climbed to 2.7% as of June, partly driven by increased import costs. And 45% of all U.S. imports are inputs, materials and components used by domestic manufacturers. When tariffs go up, so do their production costs. That means higher prices, slower hiring, and less room to invest. These are not hypothetical risks. They're playing out in real time. Canada, however, has more at stake. Its economy is more exposed, more export-driven, and deeply tied to U.S. demand. A report from Yale's Budget Lab estimates that Canada's GDP could fall by as much as 2.1% if the 35% tariffs are fully implemented without relief. Provinces like Ontario and Quebec, both manufacturing hubs, would feel the sharpest pain. But Canada is not standing still. While negotiations continue, Canadian exports to non-U.S. partners are rising. Canada is also accelerating trade outreach in Europe, Singapore, and India. This quiet realignment won't solve the short-term pain, but it strengthens Canada's hand in the long game. Meanwhile, Carney's team is coordinating provincial subsidies, investment guarantees, and federal assistance to help targeted industries weather the uncertainty. Steel, auto, and clean energy sectors are being stabilized, not dismantled.
Couple of months. But we should push, but not for a deal at all costs. And we've got to be willing to hold our line. And I think Prime Minister Carney has generally done a very good job.
A deal may still be reached before August 1st, but it won't erase the damage. Even if tariffs are reduced, the shock to supply chains, investor confidence, and bilateral trust won't be easily undone. This episode is about more than numbers. It's about how power is used and how it is resisted. Trump may still get his headline. But if Canada emerges with key sectors protected and a broader strategy for independence intact, the real story may not be one of submission. It may be one of quiet defiance. And in a world where trade wars are now fought with tweets and tariff letters, that kind of defiance might be the only form of strength that still matters.
Today, 30%, that is the amount of a new tariff President Trump just announced on goods from the European Union and Mexico starting August 1st.
We have always been very clear that we prefer a negotiated solution. This remains the case, and we will use the time that we have now till the 1st of August.
It began with a letter, first to Canada, then to the European Union, and just days later, to Mexico. Each one signed by President Donald Trump. Each one carrying the same message. Starting August 1st, the United States would impose a 30% tariff on goods from its closest trading partners, unless they struck a new deal on Trump's terms. These weren't enemies. These were allies, longtime allies. And the timing was even more startling. The threats came while formal negotiations were still underway. The result? A diplomatic shockwave rippling across Ottawa, Brussels, and Mexico City.
That all the efforts that the European Commission has made to try to accommodate, try to negotiate a deal, meant nothing for Trump.
This is not the first time Trump has used tariffs as leverage. But this round felt different. The strategy was announced weeks earlier, a new series of reciprocal tariffs, followed by a 90-day pause to allow countries to negotiate. That pause expired this month, and Trump didn't wait. Instead, he began sending out personalized tariff notices, 30% across the board, starting with Canada in early July, and then to the EU and Mexico on July 12th. The message was clear: agree to new trade terms by August 1st, or face higher costs. The tariffs would hit every corner of commerce: cars, electronics, food, medicine. Inside the White House, officials described this as a reset. One economic advisor admitted the president was frustrated by slow progress. With the original 90 deals in 90 days promise slipping, Trump turned to pressure tactics. But this was no ordinary pressure. These were public threats, delivered mid-negotiation, targeting countries that had historically built supply chains with the U.S., not against it.
What it shows that Donald Trump thinks he can maybe get a deal by threatening to escalate. But I have to think it will backfire.
The first to respond was Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney had already set a July 21st target to complete talks with the U.S. But after the tariff letter arrived, he extended that deadline to August 1st, matching Trump's. Rather than retaliate immediately, Canada held firm. Government officials emphasized continued dialogue, even as they warned they would protect workers in key sectors: steel, autos, and especially copper, which had already faced a 50% tariff. In Europe, the reaction was similar. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen confirmed that Brussels would continue talks until the deadline, but she also made it clear the EU was fully prepared to impose countermeasures if needed. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz echoed that view, warning that failure to reach a deal could have serious consequences. According to ING chief economist Karsten Brzezinski, if the 30% tariff is enacted, it could shave off 0.4 percentage points from Eurozone GDP, bringing 2025 growth dangerously close to zero. Mexico's response followed the same tone. Officials called the tariff unfair, but reaffirmed their commitment to negotiations.
On track, since the very beginning, we have worked and now are ready to respond with countermeasures.
And the Mexican officials conveyed that that 30% tariff marked, quote, unfair treatment, and that they did not agree.
We are not alone in this world. We need to be closer to our allies.
What's happening now goes beyond trade numbers or tariff rates. It's about trust. For decades, America's closest partners assumed that policy differences would be handled behind closed doors, not through public threats. Now, those same partners are being forced to choose between accepting last-minute demands or risking economic punishment. Canada has spent years integrating its economy with the U.S., from auto manufacturing in Ontario to copper refining in Quebec. The EU built transatlantic agreements on the idea of stable, rules-based cooperation. And Mexico, long a pillar of the USMCA framework, is suddenly being treated like a problem, not a partner. What Trump sees as hard bargaining, many allies are now viewing as betrayal. With the clock ticking to August 1st, one thing is clear: Trump isn't backing down. But neither are America's allies. Canada is holding the line, the EU is preparing its defense, and Mexico is still at the table. Whether this strategy leads to new deals or a deeper rift will be revealed soon. But one thing is certain: these letters didn't just threaten tariffs, they threatened relationships. And some of those may be harder to repair than any trade deficit.